Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 3 of the GR Supra GT Cup. Let's get this started. For this first turn, you want to use just a little bit of braking to bring yourself to the right side of the track. So when the curb on the right is about to start, that's when you use a little bit of braking, and right when this turn ends, that's when you want to brake as much as you can. Just take your time slowly easing off of the brakes. Don't take too much advantage of the curves, otherwise you might get an off-track penalty. Slowly accelerate, just trying to make sure that the car doesn't want to slide around too much. Try to take this next turn at full throttle, and when the path on the right ends, you want to start to brake. Slowly ease off of the brakes, just try to bring yourself all the way into the apex and carefully accelerate your way out. Notice how I was on 5th gear the entire time. Then when the new sector starts, so right around here, before you enter the blue area on the right, you want to brake hard for a moment. You can take advantage of this curb, just don't go past it so you don't end up getting an off-track penalty. So we'll fast forward through this, and for this first chicane that is coming up, you want to look for this 300 meter sign that is on the left and the right side of the track. So that's going to be your cue to be ready to start to brake, as this fence, not the catch fence, but this shorter fence on the left will be your braking point. So brake right when it starts, and this will give you just enough space to be able to make it through this first chicane. Just control your braking and throttle. Do not go past the white lines on the right side of the track, and then carefully accelerate your way out. So we'll fast forward through this once again and look for the 200 meter sign, and I use the one on the right that's playing hide and seek with you. So brake just before you reach the 200 meter sign, brake as much as you can in a straight line, and slowly ease off of the brakes. This chicane is a little bit sharper than the first one that we just went through, so you want to be a little bit more careful when you go through the chicane. Fast forward through this once again, bring yourself to the left side of the track, and brake just before you reach the 100 meter mark. You want to try to brake as much as you can in a straight line, and you want to be very smooth when you're starting to actually make the turn, so easing off of the brakes, slowly applying the throttle, just be nice and careful and don't hit the bollards. Fast forward through this once again, bring yourself to the left side of the track, and you want to look for the 200 meter sign that is accompanied by two guys in the orange suit on the left. So shortly after you pass them, you want to start to brake, then ease off the brakes a little bit, then brake a little bit more, so you can smoothly and carefully go through this turn. Take your time slowly accelerating, bring yourself to the left, and when the shadow of the fence on the surface of the track ends, you want to start to brake. So brake right when it ends, just take your time getting the car to rotate around this corner and carefully accelerate. So we'll go ahead and fast forward through this just one more time. This is the last time that we're going flat out for quite a while. And you want to start to brake before the shadow ends right here. Just slowly ease off of the brakes so you don't end up going full drift mode. Carefully apply the throttle, and you want to do lots of throttle control throughout these next couple of corners. You can use just a little bit of braking to get the car to rotate a little bit more. Just be nice and careful, nice and gentle. You do not want the car to start to slide around too much, as that will eat up your time. Then just be really careful as you exit through that turn. As you saw, I almost started to lose control of the car. Look for the pit lane that it starts on the right, and you'll brake right after the pit lane starts. So right here, you can take advantage of these curves. Just carefully ease off of the brakes, then go down to 4th gear, and then brake a little bit more. Take advantage of these curves, carefully accelerate, and you are good to go. We'll go ahead and quickly talk about the strategies. For the qualifying session, you have 7 minutes or 7.5 minutes to try to get a good qualifying time. So with these 7.5 minutes, you're only going to have one chance to try to get a good qualifying time. So it's not going to make much sense to go all out from the moment you gain control of your car, as that's going to wear down your tires. The tire wear is at times 15, so it's going to definitely impact your car through the qualifying session and on the race itself. So if you recall what the qualifying strategy was like for the Nürburgring 24-hour race a couple weeks ago, you're pretty much going to be doing a very similar thing. bring the brake balance all the way to the back of the car and just go on a nice little drive. You don't want to stress the car out too much or stress the tires out too much. You want to try to make sure that you start your qualifying lap with the best condition for your tires. So once again, you just don't have to go all out. Just take your time going through the track. And when you're going through the straights, you can go a little bit faster. Just make sure that you brake way early, just using a little bit of braking. Once again, just make sure that you don't stress the tires out too much. Some things to note is that because you do have quite a few long high-speed sections, Substream will become very useful here, but you do need to make sure that one, you give yourself and the car ahead of you plenty of space while making sure you're still within that 1.5 second gap. And if you do end up in the slipstream, whether that's for the qualifying or for the race itself, you want to make sure that you brake a little bit earlier than what I mentioned during the lap guide. So once you're getting close towards the start finish line, you want to bring the brake balance towards whatever you normally have it at for this track and car combination. So in my case, I have the brake balance set to -1, so 1 point towards the front of the car. And just make sure you warm up your tires before you start your qualifying lap. So right here is a pretty good spot to start warming up those tires, just trying to push the car a little bit more. And then once you're ready, just go ahead and go at full race pace. Try to get the best lap that you can. Make use of slipstream if you can. Just make sure you brake a little bit sooner if you're under the slipstream, and just try to drive as smooth as you can without getting any penalties at all. For the race strategy, you have to try to no stop this race, which means you have to try to take really good care of your tires, and a lot of that is going to be done by adjusting your brake balance as you go throughout the race. So before we do mention that, this is a standing start, so you want to go up to second gear, bring the traction control to 1, and once you're ready to go, that's when you start to accelerate as much as you can, and eventually bring the traction control to whatever you normally have it at. So as you saw here, I have the brake balance at 2 now instead of -1, and this is to try to preserve the front tires. The first half of this race is going to be all about trying to make sure that you preserve as much of the tire life on the front tires, as normally this car is a bit heavy on the front tires. So by bringing the brake balance to 2, you're going to be stressing out the rear tires a little bit more, but it will make the front tires stress a bit less, which will become handy when you go through the second half of the race. And of course, trying to drive as smoothly as possible, making sure that the car doesn't slide around too much, will help the tires last a little bit longer. So once again, just try to drive as smoothly as possible. So if you don't know how to adjust the brake balance on the go, you can press the multi-function display buttons, which is usually the left and right buttons on your D-pad, where you can scroll along that menu, and you'll eventually come across the brake balance, in which then you can press D up or D down to go ahead and adjust your brake balance values. The same can be done for the fuel mapping, but the fuel is not an issue at all in this race, so ignore the fuel mapping part for now. And because you're going all out in this race compared to last year, which was a fuel saving race, you're going to be going really fast, especially under the slipstream, and because of that, you have to brake early. You have to brake early when you're under the slipstream because you're going much faster than without the slipstream, which means that you need a longer distance to slow down. So as you saw right now, second place was under the slipstream, and he braked just a bit too late, which ended up having him bin it and accidentally collect the soul of that who was in first place. So eventually, when you're on your third lap, that's when you want to start to adjust your brake balance, and in this case you can bring the brake balance to 1 or even 0. And one thing that you also need to take into account is that because you should start to feel a bit of that tire wear affecting your car, you will need to brake a little bit earlier than usual. This will also apply if your tires are starting to get worn while you're under the slipstream, so you will need to brake even earlier to make sure that you don't end up overshooting the turn. And once you start your final lap, that is when you want to bring your brake balance up again on the multifunction display and go ahead and adjust it to -1. So now the brake balance is 1 point towards the front of the car. So now you're going to start to stress the front tires a little bit, but it's going to become a little bit useful here because you want to make sure that you have enough braking power so you don't end up overshooting the turn. With the brake balance towards the front of the car, you will be able to brake a bit more efficiently, so that's going to come into a bit of good usage when you're braking really hard on the Mulsanne straights. And finally, you just want to make sure that you drive as smoothly as possible. You want to make sure that the car doesn't slide around too much, as that will cost you a bit of your tire life, and that's going to really add up, especially towards the end of the race. So to sum things up, you want to try to make sure that you do a no stop for this race, as going to the pit stop for a change of tires is going to take a total pit time of 30 seconds, which is way too much, and it will put you behind those doing the no stop. So when you start the race, and this is for the first 2 laps, you can bring the brake balance to 2 or 3 points towards the back of the car. Then on lap 3, you can bring the brake balance to +1, so 1 point to the back of the car, or 0. And for the final lap, you can bring the brake balance to -1, which is 1 point towards the front of the car. But that is all for the lap guide. Sorry for the late uploads lately, since I've kind of just been out of it lately, but that's another story for another time. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. So this is Mr. MCA, wishing you a good race, and I'll see you in the next video.